Hey everyone, welcome to the 223rd episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patrons George Ellis and Rachel K. Ivey. I'm Oren Kaplan.
And I'm Matt Enlow. Today we've got Stefan Dezil on the show. He's a filmmaker and creative producer. He works with Oren. They work very closely together. And he has a ton of insight about the ins and outs of what it takes to be booked as a filmmaker, the changing climate and world that we're living in, what it takes to continue to book as a director and also develop his own filmmaking career.
Yeah, he is an awesome person, but he also works at Superlative, which is the commercial production company that I'm rep with, and he's also the person that brought me there.
Years ago, we had a live show. One of our first live shows was at Superlative, and so some of our listeners maybe had the good fortune of hanging out with him a little bit.
Yeah, they used to be called The Famous Group. They changed names, but he is not only a filmmaker, he's also an artist and an actor and a real Renaissance man and really talented. And it's fun to talk about him. He has just this crazy job where he helps directors book commercial gigs during the day. And then at night, he's made all sorts of like shorts, and he's directed a ton of music videos actually in the last year.
But besides being just like a great guy and fun to talk to and full of insight, I think that what's interesting to me about Stefan is that he has figured out how to kind of invent a job for himself that is in the industry that gives him a real view into how to develop his own career and also develop the careers of his peers and his friends and the people that he works with. And so it's kind of this interesting cross correlation between like brainstorming how he can help other filmmakers as a way that he can help himself and vice versa. And so as a result, I think he's got a really unique perspective that I think our listeners are really going to relate to, because they either want his job because it's kind of like one of the best day jobs we've talked about on the show, or they want to learn what he has learned at his day job at the very least.
Yeah, he has so much insight on like what people are looking for in a director. And we talk about that. We talk about commercials, and we also talk about the effect that Black Lives Matter has had on commercials and how it's kind of changed what people are looking for. And all around, it's a fun conversation. So I think you're really going to enjoy this. But before we talk to Steph, I really have been dying to know, Matt, what have you been working on lately?
Yeah, man, I've been really finally in a nice groove on the screenplay. I've finished the first draft during the pandemic, and I think I've managed to get to a mental state where I can really be productive and work again. And I'm in that fun spot where I know the problems of the screenplay and can kind of do those first initial big steps towards fixing it. And so it's been fun. I've been like waking up motivated and ready to work, and it's been really good.
Let me ask you, since you recently produced a movie that your wife directed and that you guys have been showing the cuts to people recently and getting a lot of feedback, has any of the feedback and just kind of going through that process like simultaneously while you're writing affecting your writing at all? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Like, how does the being in post on a project influence the pre-production or development of a project?
Yeah, because I guess just for a tiny bit of context, there's like so many rules of filmmaking that we've learned in screenwriting, and and obviously you break some things, but like act breaks and setting up a character and making save the cat moments and all that stuff. We've talked about other people's movies and stuff in those terms. Sometimes you just forget about focusing them, or you think they're not that important because they're just kind of this dumb screenwriting rule, but then you see that, hey, it actually they're
so it's so funny. I swear we didn't set this up, but I was hanging out with my wife, which is what I do every single day, and we were kind of chatting or whatever, and she turned to me and she said one of the main things that she has learned is that those things that you kind of hope are going to go away, or maybe you just ignore, or maybe you just hope you're going to figure it out later, that are in the script, they never go away. The things that you don't fix,
those like lingering in the back of your head, like this doesn't quite track, but it'll work itself out. People will get it by this scene.
When I talk to the actors, or like, we'll figure it out.
Right. The performance will explain it, kind of.
Yeah, all of that, or just the filmmaking, or like maybe you cut it, or whatever you convince yourself of when you're in that phase where you just need to lock the screenplay and you haven't totally cracked a small thing, you're hoping that maybe you'll just kind of fix it later. They always come back to haunt you. Those are the things that you're still kind of working on and trying to fix. And like all of a sudden, now you've just got a bunch of footage and you shot it the way you wrote it, and you wish that you could have just rewritten it because that's so much easier than trying to adjust footage that was shot that wasn't totally ideal yet.
Yeah, but don't you feel sometimes like if you are just trying to get the screenplay perfect before you shoot it, that you'll never shoot it?
Yes, that is true. That's certainly true. But I think that this is all just a constant balance between just shooting it and getting it ready to shoot.
Yeah.
You know? So that's not to say, like, are we glad that we shot it before the lockdown? That we didn't know was coming? Of course. We are grateful every single moment of every day that, like, we got it in the can before all of this happened. And so if we had waited literally a week or two or a month or two, we wouldn't have a movie now. So, like, are we glad that we shot? Yeah, of course. Are the things that were nagging in the back of our heads of, like, oh, like, maybe we should adjust this or, you know, whatever, they're still bothering us now, you know, months later into the cut.
I mean, that happens to me on almost every single commercial I work on, which is I'm like, this doesn't really make sense, or this is kind of confusing, or this seems too long, which is like 9 out of 10 commercials I work on.
The big difference being you don't have as much authority or control. You can't walk into the ad agency and be like, hey guys, your script is too long.
Well, I say that every time, and they're like, we read it. It seems fine to us. And I'm like, okay, but you know, there's end cards, and they're like, yeah, we'll just have them say it fast. We'll always cut it in post. We'd rather shoot it and cut it. And then, I mean, 9 times out of 10, the commercial like is not as good as it could be because of that.
Right. The flip side being on a feature, it just comes down to you.
Right.
You know, on an indie feature, I should say. You know.
Yeah, but that's kind of why you get notes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, is it me or is it everyone that thinks this, right?
Right. And, you know, there were plenty of things that we thought were great that needed clarification or a little work or whatever. And that's the other reason you need to get notes, for sure. Like, you have blind spots, certainly. But what I'm saying is that if you know that something isn't 100% ready, that's not going to get magically fixed somehow. You just have to address it at some point. And if you don't address it in development or pre-production or production, you have to address it in post or just live with it for the rest of your life.
Yeah. That's why I'm a big fan of budgeting reshoots into the original budget. Because even when you don't realize something's not working, usually there's something that doesn't quite work.
That's something yeah. We did that. We were like, oh, you know, early on, we were like, you know what, we'll plan on doing some pickups and some smaller things. And, you know, a pandemic happened. So it's a little harder to do.
I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah. Oren.
Yes.
I'm dying to know, though, enough about me. What have you been working on lately?
Well, I have a new addiction.
Ooh, do tell.
I mentioned it to you earlier, but I have been basically diving deep into Blender, the 3D software.
Smoothies, pestos.
Yes.
Even some like smooth soups.
Yes, I even make
chowders.
I use them to dice my tomatoes and cucumbers for a Mediterranean salad. No, man, I'm talking about Blender 3D, the software. It's free. It is incredible what you can do with it. Like, you can literally just do it. Did you know you can do video editing in it? Not that anyone does, but you could.
Whoa.
There's like a timeline and you can drag videos in there and you can edit them. But you can also do line art, 2D art, 3D. I mean, it's so incredible. And the community is just insane. And I have learned through my addiction to watching videos about Blender that pretty much Macs are useless for 3D graphics. If you want to be serious at all, I think you can do some like motion graphics, like titles and things like that are not photorealistic, you know? But if you are serious, if you want to do broadcast quality, 3D animation for features, for shorts, for commercials, anything, a Mac just is not going to cut it. They don't have the right graphics cards. And so I'm buying my first PC since 2005, and it's been really difficult to put it together. But I'm finally doing it, and it's gonna arrive on August 1st if everything gets shipped correctly. And I'm excited and scared, but I'm hopping into Windows.
Yeah,
back to the basics.
Congratulations. What's so funny is, so what I love about you jumping into Blender is that I feel like, in general, when people are learning software, I always recommend that they invest the time to learn in the state-of-the-art, most professional software suite they can, right? Like, you can spend a bunch of times on a bunch of like cheaper, crappier, less pro versions of like photo editing or illustration or any of that stuff, but like the Adobe suite, those skills are going to transfer over to everything that you do. So like learning Photoshop rather than learning some of those
like
baby
GAMP
step,
or whatever.
Yeah, exactly, is just going to pay dividends for forever. And so what's interesting to me about Blender is that it's kind of in this weird zone where it's not that it is industry standard the way, say, Photoshop is, but it is something that's going to continue to be supported, and there's a community behind. It's going to still have that longevity, basically, of like learning a software program.
It's just on a crazy upswing right now, and I've never really seen software do this unless it's like really revolutionizing things. And Blender is not revolutionizing things. It's just gaining like so much momentum from the community of people that use it. And industry standards are like a real tough thing in Hollywood. Like, I would recommend as one of the first moves you do if you want to work in this industry and you move to LA is to get like a MacBook or something, like to get an Apple computer. Because
I mean, when we were starting out, like you literally had to have a MacBook because you had to use Final Cut because that was industry standard for all entry level post.
That's
jobs.
why I switched in 2005 from Windows to Mac for Final Cut Pro. And then, but even now, like, I'll airdrop this to you, I'll iMessage this to you, I'll do this, can you log in? Like, everything is in this Apple ecosystem in Hollywood. Like, every office you're in, every meeting you're in, everyone has Apples. So,
like, literally, I can't think of the last time I saw a PC laptop or any other. Like, you see Android phones every once in a while.
But you kind of, like, make fun of them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at least I do. Yeah. But then, so for... Photoshop is industry standard, Illustrator is a standard, After Effects is a standard, but in visual effects, it's like 100% Windows. Like, people are using Nuke and Houdini and Maya and 3D Studio and whatever, Blender. And, Lawson, who we've had on the podcast, does visual effects for Man in the High Castle, which is like one of the best visual effects shows on Amazon Prime's video service. In Blender, they do so much in Blender. So to me, that's good enough for me, and it's free. And I actually saw a speech about this today about how so many other people, they buy Maya. They spend thousands of dollars. They buy Cinema 4D. They buy.
Yeah. How much is Maya? Maya is like $1,600. I want to say it's something prohibitive. If you're starting out, or just basically if you're not rich or making your living off of this program.
Yeah, it's hard to dip your toes in.
A really prohibitive amount of money. Yeah, it's hard to learn 3D without stealing or investing thousands of dollars.
Yeah, same with Cinema 4D. They're new now. They're a subscription-based thing, so it's like a few $100s a year you're spending every year. And now you want to get a better render or Octane. You got like all these things. You're investing money. So once you're so deep in the investment, you would never want to quit because you spend a lot of time and energy learning the software and putting money into it. And that's the miracle of Blender, is that it's free. So you're spending time, and it's so much more complicated than Cinema 4D to learn. It's like 90% of what you do is with the keyboard. It's like, hit Shift A to add a like mesh, which you select the cube type, and it's like in Cinema 4D, there's like a picture of a cube. You click on it,
Right.
But once you get past that hurdle, it's like the world is your oyster, and it's awesome. And because it's a free software, a lot of the resources that are built around it are also free. Like they have free render farms for Blender. They have free like textures and models and all these things. There's this add-in that comes with Blender where you can just type in any word and it'll show a bunch of models that you can just drag into your project. That's searching on the internet. That's being updated. Like, nobody else has that because that, it's a whole big financial thing you would have to build around it.
Well, you're making me realize that I think that when we were starting out, industry standard was the thing that was the most important. And now it seems that what's really important is a thriving community, right? If you can self-teach through tutorials on YouTube or message forums or a community of like uploaded free models or whatever it is, whatever the software that you're using kind of dictates, that to me is the real issue of what makes things really powerful and really important for a young filmmaker.
And I think those two are totally related in that where the community is where the industry becomes standardized. And so in all things Hollywood, Mac rules except for one very big, very robust area, which is visual effects and 3D graphics.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to see what happens, right? Because, that's a pretty big crack in the armor. And all of a sudden, your very expensive, very sleek MacBook could just be for executives who don't really need that sort of computing power.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I kind of blame Tim Cook. Sorry, dude. I like the guy, but CEO of Apple. My biggest
fear... Tim. I know, huge listener. Thank you for your Patreon. Yes. Don't stop subscribing.
My last thing I want to say, my biggest fear about my PC is it ships with like 14 fans, and they all have like RGB LED lights. Like,
huh?
It's
I can't hear you. What?
Exactly. It's like this weird gaming machine, and I'm like embarrassed by the fact that I even am having it shipped to my house.
So check out twitch.com/Oren Directs for all of his
directed by
gaming / Blender tutorials.
Exactly. Before we talk to Steph, I just wanted to remind everyone that we have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/justshootitpod. It's a place where you can go if you feel like you've gotten anything out of this podcast. You want to throw us a couple bucks a month. You can. $10 even for 1 month gets you a free, it depends on how you look at it, but what we consider a free Just Shoot It podcast hat. It's awesome. If we ever get back to sets, which I think we will, we've both been flirting with it in the last couple of weeks.
Pretty close.
Then you can wear it on set and people will just think you're so cool. Check it out, patreon.com/justshootitpod. Thanks. And that's all we got to say. Here's Steph. Obviously, you're a guy that finds directors at Superlative. You work with a lot of directors. You are kind of a liaison between the business side and the creative side in commercial filmmaking in a way. Can you tell us what your job is exactly?
I'm the manager of creative development. So I basically oversee all the creative endeavors of the company. And I'm also a person who I manage and foster all of the talent and artists that we work with across the board.
Is there talent other than directors?
So directors first and foremost. And then on top of that, we have a partnership with post-production company, and we work with animators and graphic designers. Basically, I kind of liaise and pull together all these artists for various projects that we do, because sometimes, depending on the commercial, they ask for kind of a 360-degree production, so graphic assets and social content and social assets and things like that. So the different artists that work on the post-production side as well.
It sounds like you're working with a lot more people than just the directors on your roster. I guess I'm trying to ascertain the difference between what you do and what a producer does. Or is it just kind of a different name for the same job?
No, it's pretty different actually, because I don't involve myself in the actual line producing of the project. I'm not really looking at numbers and permits and things like that. Like anything kind of technically,
all the crappy stuff.
Right. But yeah, when it comes to like just creative endeavors, because for me, what's most important is the creative pursuits of the director on the project, and then also of the company as a whole, because everything that we do, we're trying to grow, and that's why I go back to saying like fostering, like the creative talent that we work with, because what's really important is that like, it's not just that Oren gets the project, it's that this project is dope and it looks great, and he can get that lens that he really wants to make it look crispy and cinematic, and so that he can get the next level commercial after that, and then what can that lead to? I try to be a futurist in that way. I'm just always kind of like thinking one step ahead.
Well, can you go real quick through the process of getting a job? Like, what's like the very first thing that happens up until the job is awarded?
Yeah. So in getting a commercial job, it starts with a production company. And for those who don't understand this process, production companies, similarly to agents, represent directors. And then the production company is represented by sales reps. And we have sales reps across the United States who liaise with ad agencies who send them their creative. Now, I'm talking to all of our sales reps on a daily basis in the East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, and Southwest. And when we get creative, basically I have to, the first thing that I got to do is I have to.
Sorry, and just to clarify, when you say when we get creative, you mean like a request for pitches, basically, or
Exactly.
like boards or something like that. It's not like
you receive a script or a concept.
Creative is a noun, I guess, in this case.
Exactly.
Right. So Coca-Cola wants to make a commercial. They their ad agency writes a script, maybe makes some storyboards, and sends them to these sales reps.
That's what we would refer to as creative. Sorry. So as you were saying,
Sometimes the creative can be very specific, and we can get an animatic, and we've got boards, that basically show all the illustrations of how the spot goes and the setups. And then sometimes, as Oren knows, they can literally just be a couple of sentences describing that it's got visual storytellings and comedy and vignettes and a supermarket.
Sometimes it's so, like the one you sent me a few weeks ago was like, we are looking for directors whose fathers have had heart attacks and can
Right. Yeah. That one was
ideally
insane.
they're in Canada so that they have North American accents but not union issues.
this is more of like a quarantine thing. But my rep was like, I was like, hey, like, is there anything going on? Like, I'd love to like self shoot something or whatever. And she was like, literally, I just got creative for that. They're looking for directors who are also twins to self shoot something.
Ooh, we know some people. The Perez brothers, right?
They're not twins, man.
They're close enough.
Directors who are twins. Wow.
Dude, but with VFX, we're all twins.
Yeah.
Just get Mark Ruffalo. He did it well.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, sorry, Steph. So you get some sort of creative concept through these sales reps from the ad agencies.
And the biggest thing is that, and knowing both you guys, I know your work inside and out. So that's another thing that I have to acquaint myself with. Every director I work with, I have to know literally everything that you've ever done. So like every spot, every film, because if the creative calls, because agencies get so specific. So if the creative calls for, they want a woman pushing a dog in a shopping cart outside of a Walmart, I'm like, oh man, yeah, that's right. Matt did that, in this clip in his music video, that he did 3 years ago, and then like finding that one clip to also. So basically,
Steph,
yeah,
a lot of times, sorry to interrupt, but I think this is interesting because a lot of times, Matt or I will be like the other day you asked me if I have good farm footage, and I was like, honestly, the last time I shot a farm was my feature in 2009. Do you ever try to kind of like lift to like a few shots from something and put them in a reel, or does the piece itself have to be good? Because a lot of times, right, Matt, we have like, yeah, I worked with a sloth, but I don't like really what it turned out like.
I like that spot actually, Oren.
Sorry, I that was a bad example. Okay. I didn't mean that it wasn't good.
No, teasing. But like, yeah, they're looking for
it's
something
hyper
specific,
though.
Yeah, and then it's like, okay, yeah, I technically have farm footage, but it's not lifestyle-y. Does that count?
Or it's not good,
right.
Or it was like shot on an HVX or something.
Right. It depends on what it is, right? Most of the time, an agency, they want to see a spot that showcases the particular visual that they're looking for, but there are times where you can lift something like a sequence. The best thing, like where you can list a sequence that applies to what their request is, and that I have found success in that. And Oren, I mean, for a lot of your longer form pieces, like specifically there was something that was asking for celebrities in a grocery store, and and you had that in your web series, and I was like, oh yeah, episode 3 of Aussies in Cali had that, I think it was episode 2.
Yeah, in Italy.
But yeah, and I was able to lift that. So that is definitely a thing. And basically, so you want to put together a 3 to 5 spot reel, and then I have to pitch that to our sales reps, who then pitch that to the agency, and then the agency will choose to triple bid, usually 3 directors on the project based on the reel and its compatibility with the creative brief that they sent out.
And are you also involved? So like Superlative, let's say kind of a production company of that size usually has around 10 directors or something on the roster, and maybe a few directors that they work with that aren't officially on the roster.
Exactly.
Who chooses which director you're going to submit?
I choose the director at first, and then the next line is the sales reps. They choose who to send, because they can also only send so many, and then they send that over to, because the sales reps usually, they represent a few production companies, right? So they'll send people based on the roster that they represent.
So that's kind of something I've learned about in the last couple of years, that you're not just trying to get the ad agency to like the director you sent, but you need the sales rep to like the director you sent, so that they're saying like, hey, we got Matt and we have Oren. Matt is really great at this type of comedy. Oren is really great at these types of visuals, as opposed to, we got Matt and Oren. Matt's amazing. If he's not available, we can go to Oren,
Exactly.
Right? Like you want them to position you to the agencies in a way that is
It's
helpful.
also interesting to me. It took me a long time to realize that, because the sales reps, you don't have nearly as close a relationship with, right? Like Oren and Steph.
When you say you mean the director?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
you mean
Oren and Steph, you guys
Yeah.
are talking all the time. You're texting, you're emailing, you're kind of like up to date on what's going on in each other's lives. Whereas the sales reps, like Oren, have you met your sales reps?
It's weird. Some of them I had phone calls
Right.
with. One I had lunch with.
So, it takes that extra bit of work.
Not really.
Yeah, not really, right? So, over the years, I've realized, it's important to cultivate those relationships as well. But that's not nearly as apparent because, Steph, like you were saying, you have reps on every territory. So, if you're not
Exactly.
in the Midwest or East Coast, it's, pretty hard,
Yeah. And even Oren's done a lot of projects, in the Southwest. And even then, when you guys are in the same state, he's so far away in Texas, right? That you haven't even
Right.
been able to meet
Jack
him.
Reed?
Yeah. Have you met him in
Oh,
person?
yeah. I met him in Houston.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay. You guys did meet together.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's weird because you don't, as a director, it's already you're literally competing just to get onto a roster. Then you're competing against the people on that roster. Then you're competing, against other people with that sales rep. And then you're competing with other people at the agency. It's such a slog.
Yeah. It's nice.
I just saw an article on No Film School where this woman's like, everyone should direct commercials. You make $30,000 a day. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It's not exactly that easy.
Cool.
Right.
Great.
Like maybe in an Audi commercial with Wyden,
Yeah.
for sure.
If you're pretty much like a
Top tier.
the top-notch,
Yeah,
top-tier director, yeah.
Yeah.
Though the famous ones, I think, make more than that, right? Like a Scorsese
Right.
or Michelle Gondry or Spike Jonze probably are getting like a couple $100,000 a day.
Yeah, that's been the interesting thing about this position is that, I do get to meet the full spectrum of people, not only in the States, but all over the world. And it not only teaches me a lot, but it kind of offers me a lot of insight that I can bring to the people on our roster, when I'm seeing things and when we're pitching on a project. So basically that next step, when you're asking in terms of pitching a job, after we submit and if you get shortlisted and then you get triple bid, then I'm working with the director to build a treatment. And the treatment is basically a visual deck, something like a lookbook for films for the commercial, which the director is looking to showcase how they can plus up the agency's creative. And that process usually, we try to give it the secret sauce necessary to
So let's talk about that a little bit. I'm very curious about the secret sauce because
It's ketchup and mayonnaise.
Right.
Maybe a little relish too.
Oh, yeah.
I think as we kind of progressed in our careers, I feel like you see better and better creative decks coming in, where all of a sudden you're getting boards that are like really slick and timed out and like either professionally drawn or like somebody's really great at Photoshop and they've rendered like it feels like, oh, the whole spot is here. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to add without totally changing what the creative is. You know, like they gave you what I was going to give to them, you know? I'm sure that you've seen that in your career as well. What sort of insight do you offer to, say, Oren or anyone else on your roster to kind of help navigate what they're hoping to see out of the deck that you're sending back to them?
Yeah, well, I don't want to give away the company's secret sauce, but
Hi, David.
I can't. I know, right? He's standing over my shoulder right now. But I can give some kind of advice just in my experience for people pitching, which is it's always unique to the director. You know, I mean, like there's never really like one kind of blanket thing, but I'd say, yeah, I mean, these days, especially in a time like right now where so many